The service rifle family is a varied selection of 4 distinct weapons found in Fallout New Vegas that all share the same receiver and ergonomics. Their models are inspired by the real-life AR platform, which is most popularly known for the AR-15, M4, and M16. And while not a lot of in-game lore is given to these weapons, a lot of real-world knowledge and behind-the-scenes facts can help us piece together a fully comprehensive story of all these guns. The guns I'll be covering are the service rifle, assault carbine, Marksman Carbine, and the Survivalist rifle, as well as some bonus segments going over things like the Fallout 76 Screaming Eagle weapon skin and the M16A1 seen in Fallout Tactics. So let's start out with the service rifle. The service rifle is a semi-automatic rifle chambered to shoot 5.56 ammo. There are several traits given to this rifle that are shared with the real-world AR platform. Most importantly, its firing method, being a gas-based bolt, and its ease of disassembly and repair. This weapon is the primary weapon used by the NCR in the Mojave Wasteland during 2281. It being so common is most likely due to the ease of use and repair. Now, there seems to be a common consensus within the community that these weapons are in some way manufactured by the gunrunners, with the most commonly used narrative being that every model is a post-war creation made by them, and it's just based on a pre-war weapon or design. This is backed by a few lines of dialogue and in-game context. There are 2 lines that imply or outright mention how every gun sold by the gunrunners is manufactured by them. Those 2 being from the Vendatron and Isaac, both located at the gunrunners' name location.
All gunrunner merchandise is constructed on site.
Makers of the finest high-grade weapons and ammunition in the wasteland. If you ever get your hands on a piece of sweet, deadly hardware, there's a good chance that it came from one of our factories. Everything inside the fence is off limits, and the guards have strict orders to shoot to kill. A lot of our high-end weaponry comes from pre-war military schematics. If our competition got a hold of them, it'd be bad for business.
Since these lines state that everything they sell is made in their factory, the fact that you can buy the service rifle, not only from the Vendatron but other gunrunner vendors like Alexander, seems to confirm that service rifles are made by the gunrunners. Quick aside, because if I don't mention this, people will probably come at me. But in the Fallout fandom wiki, on the service rifle page, they state that Alexander says, the orders for service rifles and ammunition have been pouring in from a Karen so fast we can't keep up. Hell of a fight is coming. The thing is, this line does not seem to appear in game. It states that it's in the post-game dialogue, the dialogue that appears after you start the conflict leading to the Hoover Dam battle, but I haven't seen it. Plus, in the same Fallout fandom wiki, the page for Alexander's dialogue does not have it in there, even though the reference for this dialogue on the service rifle wiki page leads to this Alexander page. It's nowhere to be seen. Now, the main reason why I'm covering the evidence of the gunrunners making these guns is that Josh Sawyer seems to disagree with the notion that the gunrunners manufactured these guns, or at least are the sole reason the service rifles are found in the Mojave Wasteland. On his Form Spring posts, which are now completely gone, but have been archived thanks to roguery on the RPGcodex.net forums. On his forum spring, he is asked a question about the wood used to make the service rifle, in which he says the rifles are pre-war, indicating that the gunrunners are not making them. A day later, he is asked a follow-up question about the service rifle, asking, if the service rifles are pre-war, then what weapons are the gunrunners manufacturing for the NCR? He answers, all sorts of weapons. Service rifles being pre-war doesn't preclude the gunrunners from building new ones, as long as they can find new raw materials or refurbish old materials for new use. Gunrunners would likely be replacing parts more often than entire weapons. Based on these words, it's easy to imply the gunrunners are not the sole reason you see the service rifles in the Mojave, but they are manufacturing some. In my personal opinion, I would say that almost every service rifle you see in-game has in some way been touched by a gunrunner. Whether that be it's been looted somewhere, or they have modified or manufactured it. The Assault Carbine is a very interesting gun in this list, as it deviates from most of the guns in a few ways. One of the reasons being, it's the only rifle in this list capable of firing in full automatic. The second reason being that the ammo it fires is different from every other rifle in this list. That being that it fires 5mm instead of 5.56, which is, okay, hold on a second. This will probably be a prevailing segment through most of my gun videos, and that's because ammo has some weird, needless complications that plague almost every weapon type in Fallout. And instead of making a dedicated video, I think it'll be better to unpack them as they come up to make every video more anthological. So what is 5mm ammo, and what are its differences from 5.56? Why do some rifles use 5mm while others use 5.56? We're also going to cover .223 because every 5.56 weapon in Fallout New Vegas also uses .223. Let's start with a brief history of both ammo's appearances in-game. In Fallout 1 and 2, 5.56 does not exist, and the 5mm ammo exists alone. In both games, it's used in mid-caliber rifles and miniguns. 5.56 is later introduced in Fallout 3, and is used solely for automatic rifles, like the R91 and the Chinese assault rifle. But 5mm still exists in Fallout 3, and is only used for miniguns. And from now on, every game going forward, both ammos are used tangentially, but the uses vary. Like in Fallout New Vegas, 5mm is used for the assault carbine and for miniguns, but 5.56 takes over as the main mid-caliber rifle ammunition, used by 5 different weapons, but the only ones of note here are the service rifle and the Marksman Carbine. Now in 4 and 76, they're both similar in New Vegas, but more simplified. Miniguns use 5mm, and assault rifles use 5.56. Finally, with .223, it's used in every non-Bethesda Fallout, so Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas. And in 1 and 2, it's used by a variety of weapons, including pistols, bolt-action rifles, semi-auto rifles, and full-blown machine guns. While in New Vegas, it's used tangentially to 5.56, meaning that any gun that can use 5.56 can use .223. This holds weight in real life, as almost any 5.56 gun can shoot .223. So now for lore. Let's get .223 out of the way here and explain that it is a predecessor to 5.56, as in 5.56 is based off .223, though both ammo types are seen throughout the timeline, meaning that .223 wasn't replaced, just that 5.56 was an offshoot. The main difference in uses is that .223 was mainly for civilian use, while 5.56 was mostly used by the military. So, on to 5mm. It was initially the ammunition for assault rifles, and was the most common mid-caliber ammo at some point before the Great War. But eventually, before the Great War, it was phased out and replaced by 5.56, and 5.56 became the common mid-caliber ammo for most assault rifles. Though whether it be for cost reasons or just to use up old stock, the 5mm ammo still found a good use, and that was in miniguns. But most importantly, 5mm was specifically chosen instead of 5.56 to be used in the assault carbines used by paratroopers. So just to recap, 5mm was the standard of American assault rifles, but was eventually phased out by 5.56. Despite this, 5mm was still used for miniguns and the assault carbine. Quick personal note, I think that this implies that 5mm, after getting replaced, became kind of like a cheap alternative, meaning that it was used more as a suppressive fire type of ammunition where you're supposed to just shoot a bunch of it instead of, being dedicated for marksmanship. Now that we have the ammunition out of the way, as we previously established, the assault carbine is the only rifle in this group that in-game fires in fully automatic. And while there's nothing in-game or out-of-game that implies or confirms whether or not these guns are capable of switching between semi-automatic and fully automatic, for the sake of being incredibly thorough, I placed all the weapons down in game and used a sniper rifle to zoom in to check all the details on the receiver, looking for a selector switch. And while I found something that might be a selector switch, every model was in the same position, and there were no scribblings near the selector switch that would indicate if there are multiple selections for semi-automatic and fully automatic fire, which leads me to the conclusion that it's just a selection between safe and fire, which means that the assault carbine is the only rifle that is fully automatic. I think it's important to note here that while I did this, the game's interpretation of the rifle is what we know as the canon version of it. So the service rifle being semi-automatic in-game kind of confirms that it's a semi-automatic rifle, unless there's in-lore descriptions for it that explain otherwise. That's just what we're going to go off of for almost all these videos. Also, I want to reiterate that based on the choices of ammo, the assault carbine is the only one in the family that we see in game that is built from the ground up to fire fully automatic. My reasoning for this is something I've alluded to before earlier in the video. I believe that 5mm, after its usurping of the throne by 5.56, became more of a cost-efficient ammo to use for less marksman-heavy weaponry, as in a fully automatic rifle that is designed to place suppressive fire over marksman shots. Regardless, this weapon's existence pre-war is presumably designed for use by paratroopers. This was something I mentioned in the ammo segment, but I wish to expand upon here. The existence of this rifle as a paratrooper weapon is never disclosed in game, and is instead mentioned by Josh Sawyer. In 2 questions on Formspring, he mentions the assault carbines exist in game because of Nellis Air Force Base. and the real-world inspiration was in some part based on real paratrooper rifles. But, similar to the service rifle, there is a conflict with in-game text implying that these guns are made by the gunrunners. Though I think the same explanation for the service rifle fits here, which boils down to the assault carbines you see around Nellis are most likely pre-war, while the ones you find sold by the gunrunners and such are post-war constructions based off of the pre-war model, or faulty pre-war models that have been refurbished. The Marksman Carbine is kind of a direct upgrade to the service rifle in terms of its existence in the video game of Fallout, by requiring a higher gun skill to use, but having better damage, accuracy, and some other bonus perks like a larger mag size and a magnified scope. And instead of the wood furniture that the service rifle has, it's instead replaced by polymer and stamped steel. This weapon, according to Josh Sawyer, is also a paratrooper weapon, and it's the Marksman alternative to the assault carbine. I mean, the name literally implies this. Which means that this gun shares the same lore complications as the assault carbine. That being that, based on statements from Josh Sawyer and just general references for the gun, it should be a pre-war creation that exists in the area due to Nellis Air Force Base. But gunrunners also sell the Marksman Carbine, and since they state that everything they sell is made in factory, that means there's a conflict. But the same explanation that I used for the assault carbine can be used here. Alright, so this is the part of the video that's the most interesting in my opinion, because it covers something that is somewhat elusive in the lore of Fallout New Vegas. That being the checkpoint rifle, / checkpoint carbine, depending on who you ask, which is known in game as the Survivalist rifle. From what we know, it's a rifle chambered in 12.7 ammo, and it's used at the border between Canada and the US. The only version of the rifle we see in game is the Survivalist rifle. This rifle was once owned by Randall Clark, who was presumably a border patrol soldier that took refuge in Zion during the apocalypse. By the time we get the gun, it's heavily damaged and has some decorations, though it's easy to assume what the rifle looks like stock. Also, we can make out in the receiver, right where the magazine is shoved in, that it says property of the US government, checkpoint carbine, of course abbreviated. Some other things of note is the word stop written in French on the stock, of course because this gun was used on the border between Canada and the US, and Canada being a country populated by a decent amount of French-speaking people. But I think what's more interesting is that the ammo used has real-world importance. Josh Sawyer says that the gun is based off .50 Beowulf conversions of the standard AR platform guns that are used in real-world military checkpoints. The reason .50 Beowulf is used here is because it is better at piercing low-armored vehicles without losing its impact, and thus can hit the targets inside the car far easier. Meaning that 12.7 ammo in Fallout is an allegory for 50 Beowulf, which kind of makes it insane for an SMG and pistol to use it, honestly. The Screaming Eagle is a group of 3 weapon skins for the handmade rifle in Fallout 76. They all take appearance of an AR platform rifle, but there's no lore for this, and the skin is presumed to be non-canon. But, if you wish to attempt to shove it in the canon, then it's important to note that the nature in which you obtain this weapon is without a doubt not canon. The fact that it's a weapon skin that completely transforms the AK platformed handmade rifle to look like an AR platform rifle is, of course, solely for in-game purposes. With that aside, let's look at some breadcrumbs to create a loose lore interpretation of this weapon skin. I'd say the main interesting things about this weapon is 1, the charging handle is on the left side of the gun opposed to the right side, which is different from every other AR platform gun seen in Fallout, though it's important to note that in Fallout 4 and 76, every gun's charging handle is flipped, which has been a point of, I guess I'd say, aggravation for a lot of Fallout fans, or just gun fans in general. To me personally, it's not that big of a deal. I get why they did it, mainly aesthetic purposes, whatever. It doesn't really bother me. Almost any gun you can modify so that their charging handle is on the opposite side of the gun. So it's not that weird, but back to discussing oddities with the Screaming Eagle weapon skin. 2, the forward assist doesn't exist, and in general there are some weird differences in the ergonomics of the skin compared to not only other AR platforms in games, but real-world AR platform weapons. And finally, 3rd point. On the receiver, right above where you slide in your magazines, it says it's chambered in 7.62 ammunition, which before we go any further, I would like to have a quick aside on the magazines for these guns. Of course, I'm talking about the stock magazines used on the models for every single one of these guns, and I'll be going over 2 problems. The first problem being that the Marksman Carbine and Service Rifle both have 20 rounds, even though the model for the Marksman Carbine's magazine is larger. It looks kind of like a 30 rounder if you ask me. The second problem that I have is the Assault Carbine and the Survivalist Rifle share the same magazine model as the Service Rifle, despite the Assault Carbine having 4 extra bullets over the Service Rifle, and the Survivalist having 10 less than the Service Rifle. Starting with the first point, honestly it's a mistake, but it's not that big of a deal. My theory ties more behind the scenes, where I think that they wanted to make the gun look better visually. So along with the other upgrades, they also made the magazine look larger than the Service Rifle, but maybe they didn't want to actually increase the magazine for balancing reasons. As for the second problem, it does have in-lore logic. The 12.7 round used by the Survivalist Rifle was a much larger ammunition, meaning you can't fit as many in the same magazine shape. Therefore, it would make sense for it to have 10 less rounds. And for the Assault Carbine, while it's not entirely clarified, it is easy to assume that 5mm is smaller than 5.56. In fact, 0.56mm smaller. So fitting about 4 more inside makes sense. The M16A1 exists in Fallout Tactics, which for the most part is non-canon, and therefore this weapon is most definitely not canon to Fallout lore. Even if it was, it wouldn't cause that many complications. Who cares? Now that everything is all explained, it's time to wrap this up with a summary of everything of note so far, and the narrative I've constructed to help explain away any holes in the story of this family of weapons. So, the Assault Carbine and the Marksman Carbine are both pre-war weapons used by paratroopers. In the post-war, these weapons have been seen around Nellis Air Force Base, and are being used by people in that area, namely the boomers. And the design has been reproduced, and factory new models have been mass-produced by the gunrunners. The checkpoint rifle is a rifle chambered in a much higher caliber and is designed to pierce vehicles. Its known use was on the border between America and Canada, and the only checkpoint carbine seen so far is the unique weapon, the Survivalist rifle. Now for the Service Rifle. What we know is that it's pre-war, and there are some that have been manufactured by the gunrunners. But what was the Service Rifle's role in pre-war America? I think it's safe to assume the Service Rifle family went on a similar trajectory as the AR platform in real life. It started off with a simple mass-produced model, and then it developed into several models modified and fine-tuned for different purposes, whether that be a higher caliber to shred through multiple surfaces, or modified ergonomics, allowing it to be carried comfortably while gliding on a parachute down to the ground. This gun is the most versatile weapon for the average soldier in pre-war America, and it all started with a simple, effective rifle, the Service Rifle.
Hey guys!
So, none of this was usable. Turns out when you try to record anything with 2 layers of bandages over your mouth, it doesn't come out well. Not only because it was muffled, but my pronunciation of things was a lot harder because I had to stretch harder on my jaw to talk. So, I'm just gonna let the footage in the background play with no volume. This whole ending was just me saying that I haven't done a Fallout gun video in almost a year, and I would like to start fresh from the combat rifle video that wasn't that good, with a series that kind of covers over everything in Fallout guns that I think is important to talk about. As you can tell, I've kind of mentioned it a few times in this video that I wanted to be very thorough, because I didn't want to have any problems like I did last time, where I didn't notice that there was a pipe rifle in Fallout 2 and stuff like that. So this is me kind of saying that I will be continuing doing Fallout gun content, so stick around for that. But I will also do other things too, like Mass Effect, which was actually the first big video that I ever released. I want to do Siege content, and I have ideas for it, but there are plenty of other games I want to talk about and other topics I want to talk about besides just Fallout guns. Do keep in mind, I have a passion for firearms, and most of the games I play revolve around that. Most of the topics I talk about from those games will probably involve a gun at some point. So, thanks for watching. If you like this, consider subscribing. If you have any recommendations, leave a comment and press like. Alright, Gooners, I'm out of here.
I'm actually in extreme pain right now. I feel like I'm being burned alive. Not only from the heat that I'm currently dealing with in this room from my computer and this extreme costume I'm wearing, but also because the pulling on my face so hard. I can't, I'm going to do something very drastic if I don't get out of this soon. So,